It is August 7th, 2024, and the wait appears to be part of the punishment as we are continuing to keep an eye on Iran, Hezbollah, members of the Axis of Resistance, and what their response to Israel is going to look like. As we heard from Hezbollah's Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah this week, he noted that a response will be coming. Now, could it be just Hezbollah? Could it be the resistance as a whole coming together to target Israel? We don't know yet. Clearly, there's some psychological warfare going on both sides. And it also raises the question, how is all of this back and forth having an impact on the people of Lebanon, of Iran, the children there? I know we talk a lot about the Palestinian children in Gaza and in the West Bank, and I don't want to take away from that at all, but I do want to expand the conversation to talk about how children as a whole in this area are continuing to experience the tensions that are going on all around, but also learning from it. Because the reality is that they have parents who have been through this before, right? They have parents who have grown up in this region with these tensions, been impacted by it, but are now playing a role in this ongoing resistance, not just against Israel, but against the US as a whole, against the US coming into their region and deciding that it is going to tell people who is in charge or how their lives are going to be, deciding that they are going to continue to arm Israel, to use Israel as their aircraft carrier in the Middle East of sorts, and to not just wreak havoc, but to carry on an all-out genocide against the Palestinian people right before our very eyes. We were able to discuss all of this in depth earlier with a special guest, so let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Marwa Osman, a university lecturer, journalist, and TV host based in Beirut. Marwa, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
That's a pleasure. Thank you for having me, Rachel. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Always good to have you on the show. Now, I know that tensions are quite high where you are, to say the least. We are in a position right now where Iran is vowing a response after Israel assassinated Palestinian diplomat and Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran last week. And you have Hezbollah vowing a response after Israel killed one of their senior commanders by bombing Beirut last week. What do you make of this waiting period that we're currently in? Is the waiting kind of part of the punishment here?
Well, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah chief, yesterday during the 7th-day commemoration of the martyrdom of leader commander Sayyid Mohsen, known as Sayyid Mohsen, his name is Fuad Shukr. He said that the waiting process is part of the punishment, but the waiting process is also stressing for us as well. Maybe not as much because we've been under this kind of aggression for the past 10 months, along with the genocide going on in occupied Palestine and Gaza. But the waiting is tense, and I think the majority of those of us who are really stressing about waiting is that we are both excited and concerned. Excited because it's about time someone put a leash on Netanyahu and made him stop. There are red lines that you do not cross. If you think that you're crossing it in Gaza, then you can cross it in Beirut. That is absolutely not the case. Not because Beirut is much more important than Gaza. No, absolutely not. Gaza is the most important spot on the planet. But it's because if we don't put a leash on it, we're going to see more atrocities. And I think it is part of the support for Gaza and the protection for Lebanon. So that's why we are excited to see it. But we're also concerned because at the end of the day, Rachel, you might want as an adult to be part of a resistance or to be part of the support group or support system for Gaza, but you have kids, you know what I'm saying? And you're concerned that your kids might be traumatized. They might see something that you saw when you were a kid and never ever wanted to have your kids see that, because my eldest now is 11 years old. And the first time I ever witnessed a war, I was 9. I was younger than her. And she's dealing with it much better than how I dealt with it as a kid. Maybe because I have so much more knowledge than what my parents had, because we did not live in Beirut, but we were on vacation, and it started in 1996. But maybe because I'm more knowledgeable on the military level and the strategic and political level, maybe, but also it has to do with the kids themselves and with the resilience that I see in their eyes. And I try not to show them a lot what's going on in Gaza, because I remember myself being traumatized when I was 9 and seeing my own community when I saw the first baby without a head being pulled out of the rubble. I don't want my kids to see that, but I do want them to see that there are atrocities. So I pick what they need to see, because I don't need them to live with that. Maybe we're in a spot in the world, Rachel, where eventually they might have to face it. But I'm trying to protect them as a mother as much as possible. But I do show them some atrocities, because they need to know what's going on in the world. And I do show them the resilience of the children in Gaza, and the people and the women and the elderly, and how they're coping and how they're smiling. And some of them are dancing, because that's the only way to do it, or else you go crazy. And they understand what's happening, and that's the worrisome part. But the resistance has to do what the resistance has to do at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that, because I can't imagine what it would be like to be a child in this situation. Even just yesterday with Israel coming in and breaking the sound barrier over Beirut with a number of sonic booms. I mean, as a child, you may have no concept of, okay, is this full on war, right? You don't really understand the psychological warfare that we're currently going through back and forth. And even if you're not a child in Gaza, where clearly they are going through so much, I mean, still, I would think being in Beirut, there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, and you only have so much life that you've lived to be able to compare this current experience to. And I think just looking at the current state of things, it has been a bit shocking to see Israel carry out the string of attacks and assassinations that they did last week. And it feels insane to say that, right? They're carrying out a full-on genocide in Gaza.
No consequence. And they expect no consequences, Rachel. Look, when you spoke about what happened yesterday in Beirut with the 6 sonic booms, the breaking the sound barriers, and you say how kids are really they're aware of it, but there's a question that they always answer, because the first thing they say, is it an airstrike? And you tell them no, because there's the different. I'm a bit experienced from the 2006 war. I know when it's a sonic boom, when it's an airstrike, when it's coming from a marine vessel, when it's coming from an actual artillery shelling. So I know the difference. This sounds crazy, but that's reality. So I explained to them that no, this is not an airstrike. This is just a sonic boom. And I keep explaining what a sonic boom is, because they're too young to understand the physics behind it, how it's happening, and how the waves are making that sound, and how the plane is moving so fast. And I try to explain it, and their question is why? If they are not bombing something, if they are not conducting some sort of why are they doing this? And the only answer is terrorism. They are terrorizing the public because the sound of the sonic boom, Rachel, is at least 3 or 4 times louder than the sound of the airstrike. And it sometimes causes the glass and the houses to break because of the enormous waves that it generates. And the kids, if you hear a loud, if it's the 4th of July and it's a one big firecracker, you have the adrenaline just starts pumping, and that's what kids do. I was actually doing some cooking and preparing to listen to Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah's speech. I was in the kitchen, and I found them standing there in the long hallway in the house, and I stood there and just said, breathe, just say Bismillah in the name of God, breathe, it's okay. There is a second one coming. And I was joking about it on social media today, saying that the sentence that we repeat now every day is, wait for it, there's a second one coming. So don't be alert, don't be afraid, because it always comes in pairs. So it's just breathe. When they see you as an adult dealing with it normally, they accept it, but they don't know what's going on the inside. They don't know how you are melting on the inside, because you're seeing the terror in their eyes. You might really don't care about the sonic boom and know the difference. And even if it's an airstrike, I mean, if you are an adult and you are adapting to the situation, or already have adapted for the situation, and you completely accepted your fate that you might die in an hour, tomorrow, it's fine for an adult. But for a kid, it's hard to explain. And for a mother, it's hard to see it in the eyes of the kids. So when that happens and you see the resilience, you start understanding why the kids in Gaza are acting that the way they are, despite the fact that they have the upcoming years that they will witness are going to be very, very tough and challenging for them while they start creating their own personalities and their own attitudes in the world. So that's what really hurts my heart.
Yeah, yeah, and I know that, so many we've all had experiences as children that we remember that stick with us, and I know that's got to be particularly hard because on your end you're able to look at this and to compare it to what you've been through before, and you want your kids to see that resilience, but at the same time
You
you
want to
you
protect
don't
them.
want them to be so traumatized that they are, forever remembering this moment that they're in. And I know that it really is a human experience that so many people around you are going to be able to relate to. And going back to what you were saying about almost kind of that excitement, waiting to see, okay, what is going to happen, and just looking at the string of attacks that Israel carried out last week. I mean, it was kind of surprising to see. It seems as if they want a response from the entire axis of resistance. It's almost like they were begging for some sort of regional conflict. What kind of a position does that put not just Iran, but also Hezbollah and other members of the resistance in when they're trying to weigh, okay, we have to respond, but at the same time, they have made it very clear, look, we don't want a regional war. We just want you to let the
They can
Palestinians be
stop.
free, stop bombing them
Exactly.
and starving them to death.
Exactly. But let me tell you something, Rachel. I was following the news since yesterday, especially after the speech of Sayyid Nasrallah, and I was watching a bit of Zionist media, and I was interested to know what they think about the assassinations that happened. And a large number of the people, especially with whom are members of the Knesset, and the Israeli Knesset, and one of whom was actually a former prime minister, also talking about these assassinations. And he specifically said that this is a proof and evidence that Netanyahu does not want to go to the negotiation table. That Netanyahu, by killing the top negotiator who's sitting just across of you from that table, you're telling not only the people of Gaza, but the world that you don't care about any sort of efforts to find a ceasefire and to stick to a ceasefire. You're telling also the world that you will continue to terrorize the people and the nations around you as you see fit, and no one will ever put a leash on you or hold you responsible or even show you some consequences to these kinds of actions. And then I hear the Knesset member, who's an Arab Israeli, I don't know how that works, but he's part of the Knesset anyway. And he was saying that Netanyahu keeps saying that he's doing this for deterrence. What kind of deterrence? And he says, like, he says a word that is very famous in Arabic, and apparently they use it also in Hebrew. He says it's no deterrence, no batikh. Batikh means melon. When you say no deterrence, no melon, it doesn't mean the actual fruit. The word melon in Arabic means nonsense. We use it in two different sets. It means nonsense. It means, what are you talking about? No, that's not what you want. It's not deterrence. So I was listening to what the Zionist media was talking about, and then I started thinking about what specifically Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was saying, because you had a lot of over the past 8 days. You can hear a lot of statements, read a lot of statements coming from the Islamic Republic of Iran, because it's a huge nation and it has a lot of institutions. So everyone is doing statements and everyone is increasing the rhetoric against a Zionist entity. So it's a lot of nuisance. It's a lot of voices. So you need, for example, if you have the president speaking or the speaker, the House Speaker speaking, or, for example, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, the leader of the revolution, speaking, then you listen very carefully. That's why I listen very carefully to what Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was saying, because he is the unappointed or the unofficial commander of the forces of the Axis of Resistance. That's how they look up to him. So he was explaining how the retaliation would happen, and he was using psychological warfare by saying that we might do it alone, we might do it in a collective effort, coordinated effort. But he was very specific, and he literally said it. We do not want to expand the war, but if you want to push us there, we don't mind. We don't want it because we know that both sides will suffer dearly, especially our side, not necessarily meaning that we will suffer more, but we know the firepower that Israel has in the air, and we know the capabilities, because with the evidence being Gaza and the evidence before that being the Dahiya doctrine, they have a doctrine called the Dahiya doctrine. The word Dahiya means suburbs, and this is how where I'm living right now. It's called the suburbs, but it's the suburbs of Beirut, the capital, but it's called Dahieh. So Zionist Israel has a doctrine called the Dahieh doctrine that they used in 2006 by carpet bombing the entire area. The building that I'm living in right now was only recently put up. It was, I think it was constructed in 2012, late 2012. So it was fairly like recently. But the apartment or the apartment building that was before it was completely decimated by Zionist Israel. The entire region, the entire avenue here was completely decimated. At the end of my avenue, like 300 meters down, there's a big block, apartment block, something's like it's similar to it's an urban city, so it's packed. So it's a block. I think it's more than 20 apartment buildings stuck together. The last day of the war, they decimated it, and there were just scores of people who were martyred, and scores of people who were running down the stairs. One of which, and you see how people sometimes they just they cheat death by seconds, and these people are still very traumatized from that incident. So we know the firepower of Israel, but at the same time, we're not really afraid because we know that our resistance can protect us and it can reciprocate, it can cause harm. And Sayyid Nasrallah was explaining how the resistance can cause equal harm by saying that during since 1948 up until the late 2000s, Israel would bomb our houses, bomb our institutions, our schools, our hospitals, and we would bomb nothing. We would be displaced, they wouldn't. We would be killed, they wouldn't. We would be traumatized, they wouldn't. But that's not the case since October 7. Since October 7, ever since after the Al-Aqsa flood operation, and they started this genocidal crime against Gaza, Lebanon decided to open a support front, and they started bombing areas. And by the way, they started bombing areas which are Lebanese occupied land. They didn't even start bombing Palestine. They started bombing our own land, still occupied by Israel, which is the Shiba Farms and the Kfar Shuba Hills and the 7 villages. So according to international law, it was perfectly legal for what Hezbollah did. So you can't say that Hezbollah attacked Israel. No, Hezbollah was trying to liberate its land by opening a front to support Gaza at the same time. Perfectly legal. So since then, it's reciprocal. You see houses, you see, for example, my village, which is Khiyam village on the border with occupied Palestine and the Golan Heights, half of it or more than half of it completely decimated. I did an interview with a friend of mine, Dimitri Laskaris, and I sent him one of the videos of the rubble around the town. And it's a town that was built recently, also after the 2006 war, because also during the 2006, they completely carpet bombed it. So you see how people's effort, how people's lives, because it's different. Our lives here is very different from the West. Because here, first of all, you either have a land that you inherit from your family and you build your own house from bricks in it, or you buy the land like I did with my husband, because his father didn't live much to give him any inheritance. He was killed when he was 23 years old by Zionist Israel when he was part of the Lebanese army, the man and the picture behind me. So we together, we decided to buy the land and start building the house, and it took us 9 years to finish, and less than a year living in that house when October 7 started. So looking at this, usually we only saw it on the Lebanese side, but since October 7, we also see it on the Zionist Israeli side. Their homes were bombed, their institutions were bombed. Their school and hospitals weren't, because our resistance is a moral one. And the morals and values are not to safeguard the enemy's citizens. It's to safeguard our Islam, our religion, because our religion says when we fight the enemy, we should not be fighting kids, women, or hospitals. We should not be fighting the weak. That's our doctrine. That's our belief. So we don't do that. Even though when you watched the 3 episodes of the Hudhud, the Hoopoe, the episodes released by the Hezbollah military media, you could see that those drones were flying above malls, schools, and hospitals. That's a message, meaning that we can see you and we can target you, but we choose not to, because this is not what we do. This is what you do. You bomb them, and then you say that, no, it was the resistance, like, for example, what happened in the Imam Madani in the Baptist hospital. They bombed, and the issue is they continue to expose their lies when they continue using the same weapon, because the Imam Madani, the Baptist hospital, did not have a hole in the ground that would indicate an airstrike. But they used just 2 months later the same weapon in South Lebanon, and it was caught on camera where they used a smart bomb that actually explodes before coming down to the ground, which is why you saw a lot of people at Ma'madani losing their dismembered, losing their limbs, losing their legs, losing eyes, because it was because of those shrapnels that were released, because it explodes before it reaches the ground. And we have video from South Lebanon where they used that against journalists. And God protected those journalists because they could have been killed by this bomb that did not leave any mark on the ground because it's exploded above ground and the shrapnels were thrown all over. So they get exposed with the way that they handle things and the way that they target war crimes, the way that they target civilians and people who are helpless. We will not do that. But I think what he said was obvious. He said we will reciprocate, meaning that you bomb our capital, the retaliation will be on what you consider as your capital, because we don't consider Tel Aviv to be capital of anything. We don't recognize Israel. But he said, if you bomb our capital, we're bombing yours. You killed civilians, heads up. You killed children, oh, heads up. And you killed a leader, one of the top commanders in Hezbollah, so expect the same. Now, people say, but oh, wait a second, Israel was retaliating against Majd al-Shams, where Hezbollah killed 14 kids. An absolute lie. You could go and ask the people, the Syrian occupied people of Majd al-Shams, saying that themselves when they kicked out Netanyahu, when they kicked out Smotrich, then they called them traitors and war criminals, and they don't want to see their faces. Because Majd al-Shams, prior to the incident, was receiving for at least 4 months failed Iron Dome missiles falling on them. The same thing that we saw in Naharia 2 days ago. Why did the Israeli entity acknowledge what happened in Naharia and not acknowledge what happened in Majd al-Shams? Why did the Israeli entity military spokesperson go live on air and tell them, we apologize because this was a failed Iron Dome and it hit the highway in Naharia and it killed, I think, 19 people. But the Majd al-Shams one, they were pointing fingers at Hezbollah, despite the fact for 10 months, Hezbollah never, ever targeted any civilian areas, only military bases. And we have a police, actually, we have an international so-called peace force in Lebanon called the UNIFIL, which are UN forces in Lebanon, and they record everything that's going on. And they recorded how during that specific time when Majd al-Shams happened, Hezbollah did not send any rockets, any drones, any missiles. It was a failed Iron Dome because Hezbollah was sending a drone to another place, but the Iron Dome missile failed and went all the way to Majd al-Shams. So you also have this evidence that neither the White House nor the international community wants to acknowledge, but the UN has acknowledged because they said they had a statement out there, but that they have no evidence that it was Hezbollah that shot that missile at Majd al-Shams. And you also have the footage from Naharia. You have footage from Majd al-Shams and footage from the 2 days ago Naharia Iron Dome missile. You can compare them. 100% identical explosion. That was an Iron Dome missile.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you bring that up because at the time, and granted, I mean, I'm in the US, so I kind of expect the mainstream media here to just go with whatever the US government says, whatever Israel says on that. And that's exactly what they did. They claimed, oh, well, we know that, Hezbollah was responsible for this rocket attack, and therefore Israel is justified in bombing Beirut and carrying on with one escalation after another. And watching the way that the US has responded to this, I mean, the Biden administration is sitting there and they're claiming that, oh, they're going to provide more and more support to Israel. They always talk about helping Israel, quote unquote, defend itself. Yet Israel is the one that started all of this, right? They are the ones who not only carried out these recent attacks and assassinations, but they have continued on to be the perpetrator of every single attack and every reason why you have the axis of resistance now fighting back against them. What are those concerns when the US is basically giving Netanyahu a green light and a blank check saying, do whatever you want to do, knowing that it could drag the US into a regional war?
Well, funnily enough, I was watching this morning a briefing by the White House spokesperson, and he was having a discussion with one of the prominent journalists, the White House journalist there, and I don't want to say the wrong names, but he was sitting there, he's an older gentleman, and he was telling them, so you do recognize that Iran has the right to defend itself after Israel conducted the assassination operation on Iranian soil, killing a guest for the Islamic Republic? And he said, no, I don't recognize that. I didn't say that. And he said, but if this was a European country and a guest house for the government was attacked, you would consider that as a terrorist attempt, right? And they have every right to defend themselves, right? And he said, I don't want to answer a question based on hypotheses. And he said, okay, then let's answer a question based on reality. So you said, and everyone on board the so-called international community and the free peoples of the world said that Israel has a right to defend themselves when you saw what happened in Majd al-Shams, despite the fact that we do not have any evidence that suggests that Hezbollah fired at Majd al-Shams, but you immediately made a statement and said we defend Israel, we support Israel, and we acknowledge that it has a right to defend itself. So why does Israel have the right to defend itself and not other people that were a scene, that their home was a scene for a devastating operation, a crime against humanity? You're killing a man and not in the battlefield. It's the same way that they assassinated Qasem Soleimani. They had every chance to do that when he was in battle, and he would have loved it because this is how he wanted to leave this planet. But they chose to assassinate him when he was a guest in Iraq, on Iraqi soil, and he was given a file of negotiating diplomacy between Saudi Arabia, Iran, and other people. So he was trying to build bridges between the peoples of the region, and he was assassinated by the United States of America with a green light given from Trump. The same thing now happened with a green light given from Biden, because no one on earth can make me believe that the United States of America, that the Israeli entity, ordered the Mossad to conduct this assassination without any prior knowledge to the United States of America. I have a lot of friends who were former generals and former retired Army generals from the United States of American Army, and they particularly told me that they knew for sure, because they were part of that system, they knew for sure that Israel cannot conduct any sort of operation outside its own so-called territory without giving notice first to the United States of America, and added to that while having consultants from the United States Army present in the room when they make that decision. He assured me that. And the issue is, I completely believe him, because I completely believe that the Zionist entity is basically a one big United States of America base, a military base. Or else how would you describe and explain the open corridor of weapons that was sent, and top-notch weapons that were not used before? They're being tested on us, on the people of Gaza and the people of Lebanon and the people of Yemen and the people of Syria and the people of Iraq and the people of Iran. Israel is bombing everyone with American weapons. How would you explain the corridor of weapons that have been open since October 7? While Israel claims to be claims to have the most ferocious they call it the what do they call it? The army that is invincible, the invincible army. How do they explain to their communities and to the world by saying that they are the invincible army, but they couldn't last for 2 months without having this corridor open between Washington and Tel Aviv with top-notch weapons? And you had marine vessels, you had F-16s, you had batteries. Now, last week, the United States of America was sending new forms of Iron Dome and Patriot missiles to the Zionist entities, so they can spread it all along the border between Lebanon and occupied Palestine, interceptive missiles to try and stop the Hezbollah missiles. And they practically failed, because 3 days ago, there was some sort of a barrage of Katyusha rockets sent from Lebanon in retaliation to a massacre that Israel committed. Just 2 days after the assassination happened, they committed a massacre in a small town in South Lebanon called Sham'a. Sham'a, by the way, means candle. That's the name of the town. And they killed 5 Syrian refugees, a woman, her husband, and 3 kids. And they killed 4 Lebanese, and they injured 8 other Lebanese civilians, all civilians in one neighborhood in that area. So Hezbollah responded with a barrage of 50 to 60 Katyusha rockets, and the Iron Dome missile failed, because a lot of those missiles entered and landed, especially in Margeliot and in Haria and in other areas of occupied, 15 illegal colonial settlements. And I have it on my Telegram somewhere. I have the map with which settlements they were. So there you go. Even with that corridor being open, and even with the Israeli entity being the biggest U.S. military base on the planet, made specifically here after World War II, to continue the Western Empire's hegemony over the country, to continue to loot our resources, and to continue to divide us, to continue conquering us. But I think their plans now are failing, since we have seen how the axis of resistance had grown, and very fast, if I may, because what we're seeing now, we didn't see at least 10 years ago. And I think that the global war on Syria and the 82 country alliance that the United States of America, the UK, and France led against Syria was a major catalyst, was a big catalyst to bring about the axis of resistance as we see it today. Because, you know, Rachel, when you have nothing else to lose, when you lose everything, you lose your life, you lose your opportunities, you lose family members, you lose the light at the end of the tunnel. You have nothing else to lose, so you fight back. And this is the story of our region. We fight back because we have adapted to losing everything, and we don't mind making the enemy lose again.
Yeah, and I know that when it comes to US foreign policy, they act as if there will be no blowback. And they are seeing now in record time that not only is there blowback to their policies, but there also is a growing resistance, because you have so many people, exactly going back to the beginning when we're talking about, children who have been traumatized. Those children grow up and they remember and they know exactly what they've been through, and they learn
There you
to
go.
continue to fight
I'm
back.
living evidence for you, because that's what happened. I was not born here. I didn't live here for the decade and a half of my life. But I was here for the most part for the wars, the 1990, a bit of the 1992, but the 1996 one, we were trapped here. We were on vacation and we got trapped, and the 2006 one. And in between the 2001 with the liberation. So I lived through that as a child. And now as a woman, there's no power on this planet that would change my mind when it comes to self-determination and the right to have freedom, the right to liberty, the right to your own resources, the right to resist occupation, to resist those who are. Look, people are very focused on Gaza, and it's very important to stay that way, but we also need to focus on the West Bank. Every day, the Zionist entity is destroying 3, 4, 5 buildings, not only houses, detonating them, not destroying with air. No, they actually work an entire day to organize the IEDs and completely detonate the house, because they don't want a family living there anymore, because they want to give the land to settlers. If that's not a war crime, I don't know what is. And there are kids there, and they're watching, and they're becoming more aware of what's going on. Because what happened in Jenin last July 2023, what happened in Jenin, if you remember and you go watch it again, the kids who were fighting, the young men fighting in Jenin were kids in 2002, when Zionist Israel entered the camp of Jenin and carpet bombed it. They grew up with that kind of violence that lived inside of them, the violence that they saw, how the occupation was bestowing upon their own people, upon their communities. There's no house in Jenin that has not lost a member. The same thing with Gaza, the same thing with Al-Quds. So you're talking about a people who are very resilient, but because it's of the pain that they have suffered. You become resilient because you learn from the pain, and you know how to handle the pain and how to adapt to sudden challenges, and then move on with your life. Because in any other part of the world, you see, for example, I'll give you the United States of America, for example. You have kids who are constantly under supervision and going to psychiatric help because their parents got divorced. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not saying that a family unit being disintegrated is not a big thing for the child to live through, but it doesn't equal an airstrike on your head. It definitely doesn't. And I only went to a psychiatrist fairly later on in my life, when I figured out that I was overreacting to things that are happening that are too unworthy for me to overreact over. And I had no answers as to why am I overreacting. So I had to go and see a specialist for that. And he explained to me that I am always trying to be faster than the problem. I might feel that there's a problem happening, so I try to run faster than it, so I wouldn't fall into it, hence causing more problems. So I understood that. I understood that he's telling me this because he's saying that this is how you usually run away from an airstrike. This is how you usually run away from a physical danger. And he helped me a lot along the way to understand this and to get more mature and to get over this new barrier of overreacting over silly stuff, and also becoming a mother and having that patience to deal with this little small thing that takes over your life. And sometimes you sit and ask yourself, okay, what if I'm not good enough? What if this person grows up to be mentally ill because of me and whatnot? These questions are actually healthy questions, but sometimes you overreact to them because of the trauma that you pass through. So all of this needs help, but as a community, we have not really normalized with the idea of this kind of help. And I hope this kind of help reaches the Palestinian kids as soon as possible, as soon as the day after begins, because they need help. Because I was watching this morning, Rachel, a video of a 6-year-old kid who speaks perfect Arabic. And you know, Arabic is a very, very hard language. And, and his pronunciation is perfect. He's such a beautiful boy. And he's explaining with such eloquence how the Israeli soldier barged into their house. They started shooting. They shot his mother, who was 7 months pregnant, in her belly, and she bled till she died. And then his father, who was sleeping, he awoke and he started running, and they started beating him up. And then they fired at him in front of that 6-year-old. He was 5. He's now turning 6. Instead of in front of that 5-year-old kid, and he's retelling the story, and you can watch his eyes and you see how the vision is moving. Those slides are moving in front of his eyes. And then at the end, he asks him, okay, what do you want now? And he says, a piece of cake. I want a cake. Do you have candy? I want a piece of cake.
Oh, wow. And it's just, you sit there and you're going, how is it? And I know, you know, we talk about how children are incredibly resilient, and they are, but it's like you have a part of the world where they are going through things that, right? I mean, kids in America, adults in America, right? We have no concept for what these children are going through, even when it comes to just not only the atrocities that they're facing and the violence, but also being in a position of starving and not having any of their basic needs met. And you have someone like Israel's finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, who made a recent comment claiming that, oh, it would be moral and justified to starve 2 million Palestinians to death. And it's like, we're sitting here. Yeah, I'm like, we're sitting here not only watching a genocide being played out right before our eyes and live streamed all across social media, but we're watching the intent, right? We're watching the rhetoric from the Israeli officials, who we've seen since day one, since October 7th. Their rhetoric has been that they are going to carry out a genocide, and we've watched them do that. And I know that there is certainly a lot at stake here all around, and I really appreciate the work that you're doing on your end, and also the work that you're doing as a mother to educate your children. I know it's not easy going through everything that you've been through, but really working to help the next generation, because I think that even now I hear this in America, where people are saying, oh, you know, why have kids? This world is going to hell, right? They have so much pessimism, and they're living in America where all of their needs are met and they have nothing to really actually be concerned about. So I do appreciate the work that you're doing there, and, you know, keeping that hope alive, because that's all we really have at the end of the day.
And I want to thank you, Rachel, for highlighting this region and the people of this region and giving me a voice on your platform, because that means a lot. That means that even though we're so far away, we are like, I think, 7,000 miles away, even though that the distance is there, and sometimes people just carry on with their lives, it's important to listen and have compassion and get those feelings rolling inside of you, because it also gives you, it sets your priorities straight, and it helps you evolve as a human being, and as a community, even if you're watching from afar. So thank you for allowing me on your show again, and I really appreciate all the effort that you are doing, and your voice is extremely important for the people of this region, and in hopes for peace to come. Until then, we're going to be waiting for that retaliation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to join me. Marwa
My
Osman,
pleasure.
a university lecturer, journalist, and TV show host based in Beirut. Thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thank you.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment, and as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. If you want to support my work, you can also check out my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/rachelblevins. That's where you can sign up as a monthly paid subscriber and join the community there. As always, thank y'all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.